extraordinaire Justin Urquhart-Stewart and his cat. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Glad to see the cat is there.
And a decent waistcoat as well.
Sorry? And the waistcoat.
And a decent waistcoat.
Yes.
A proper red one, you see. Anyway, carry on.
Well, you're very much in the festive spirit. I'm apparently a little too funereal this morning, but there we are. So, look, Justin, Rachel Reeves, we've talked about her before. Here we go. We talked about there was a lot of downplaying. Oh, we've got a 20 billion fiscal hole. Then it seems to have become a 40 billion fiscal hole. There was this void of information. Then we had this budget. Employers' national insurance was the big thing here, where all the companies said, oh, hang on a minute, this is going to really impact upon our businesses. I've heard it from small businesses as well, people like running pubs and so on. And so there is no confidence.
There is no confidence, and you're absolutely right. Who's the biggest employer in this country? The answer is small businesses. We're the most important part of our economy, small businesses. And if you manage to upset them, you have a big problem indeed. Also, if you upset the consumer, because we're about the consumer, you and I going out to supper, about 2/3 of the economy. And so the whole thing will actually depend upon that vital word of confidence. And instead, we had a government which was doing diametrically the opposite, saying, oh, we're doomed, but it will get better eventually. Now, equally, put a look around the world. Europe is doing badly at the moment. China is in a desperate state and trying to stop a recession there. It's slowing up dramatically. There's only one economy who's actually doing rather well, and that, of course, is the States. So what are they doing differently? And the answer is, well, they're being more imaginative in terms of going to the primary driver of the economy, which is Mr. and Mrs. Joe Schmo, getting things moving, the consumer, because if they are feeling more confident, they move house. If they move house, then they actually have to put a new kitchen, bathroom in, and other stuff. Lo and behold, the economy starts moving. Now, add to that, then the small companies setting up and having the right support behind them, and you've seen some fantastic, particularly the tech areas. Now, part of that we can actually do ourselves. We're really good at tech. We've got some very good tech centres, but absolutely useless at financing. We start them, then the dear Americans come over and buy them and send them back to California. So we are wasting our opportunities. Also, make the economy so exciting that people will want to be here. It doesn't cost a huge amount, because you do is give people the tax breaks, like things like enterprise investment schemes, and do that on a regional basis so that people will start businesses. It doesn't cost the government anything at all, but it encourages confidence and money coming in, not just domestically, but internationally. And we used to be in a position where smaller companies didn't have to pay corporation tax to start with, because you need the ability to get profitable and grow. Encourage them. The larger companies can pay it. Of course they can. So we've got things the wrong way around. We're not looking at the levers or using the levers which will get this economy moving faster than actually most people would expect.
And that, for me, is the key here. There's no aspiration, no vision at all being sold, and I think you summed that up rather beautifully. Rachel Reeves has dug her heels in. She's refusing to change. I mean, certainly, in terms of the policies that they've inflicted so far, I still think the winter fuel allowance was one of the weirdest things they could have done quite so early on. And her response to this, all she's got to say for herself is, while the figures this month are disappointing, we have put in place policies to deliver long-term economic growth, which could have come out of the mouth of a Dalek.
It really is. It's going to be fine one day. Brilliant. But in the meantime, we're going to have a bad time. That's not exactly inspirational, is it?
No.
We can look at the positive things without necessarily having sparkly things in our eyes, but actually look at the areas where we can be successful. We know the bits that will react. We know that actually, because we've set up more small companies than business and France and Germany put together, we're very entrepreneurial. What we're not very good at, though, is actually then growing them. But we then have this fixation that the government must put money into, well, we haven't got any money. What the government can do, though, is create the right background so it attracts investment, not just domestically, but also internationally. And, of course, bear in mind, there's no shortage of money in this country. An awful lot of money in pension funds. Doesn't mean it all has to be put on the 230 new market, but it can be directed into regional businesses from those regional pension funds. Now, those tech companies, and you know where they all are. We've got things like everything from, you hear the sort of Silicon Valley. Well, we have Silicon Fen, Silicon Glen.
Silicon Roundabout.
Silicon Roundabout, and we have Silicon Gorge. You could have a silicon implant. Actually, no, it's something different. But you get all these other areas, and frankly, throughout the whole of the United Kingdom and Ulster. And so why not help them by way of tax break to say, actually, what we're going to be doing here is we'll give you 50% cover if you're actually going to eventually go bust. So the government doesn't pay anything unless things go wrong. But what it also means is the government doesn't have to start choosing, actually, this is the business of the future, because governments are useless at that. And I'm not saying, actually, the people in the city are necessarily much better. The city gets in red braces probably don't help. But at least they've got the experience and also willing to take the risk. And bear in mind, as entrepreneurs in my life, I've found been in a position where it's rather frightening sometimes. Your house is on the line, your family's on the line, and are you already prepared to take the risk? And it's a big leap at the moment. If there was an incentive to sit there and say, look, actually, it's all right, we're going to cover you a percentage as a small company or a growing company, and if the worst comes to the worst, you'll get some of your money back. But we know a proportion of those will succeed. And the tech companies are those of the future. And when people sit there and look at things like steel plants and look at car manufacturing, all perfectly good businesses, but that's yesterday's industry. We want to be dynamic so people want to come here and see Britain as a place to actually work. It's not a matter of choosing whether we want to do European or American. Either side will give us absolutely lousy deals. What you want to do is actually make yourself look stunningly attractive. Say, I want to be there because those small companies don't pay any tax. To start with, on Waterpoint, they really incentivize new people, new businesses coming in, getting going. Get that again, and it come back to that word again, confidence. So at the end of that is, of course, then people going out at Christmas saying, I'm going to spend more. This Christmas, I'm afraid the person who's going out is going to be the Grinch. It's going to be really rather disappointing.
Do you think Labour understands business? And particularly, you started off by saying that the lifeblood of business are the SMEs. These are the small businesses, the ones you talk about, where you put all your money in a pot and then you try and open a mum and pop store or you do some sort of neighbourhood cafe or whatever. It's really hard work. It's your own money, and you should really be incentivised for taking that initiative, particularly when you look at the unemployment figures in this country.
Yeah. And that's what you want to be able to do, because it's not necessarily saying business starts from large fat cats actually starting new businesses. Most of it is actually people getting together on a very small scale and actually trying to build it up from there. And it's amazing how successful it can be, because these people get experience of risks. They know the areas they're dealing with. Now, I look at the Labour government at the moment. Not much in the way of experience there. We have, especially with the Chancellor, with all the dubious CV as to what she's been doing. Mind you, I look back at the Tories, their experience of smaller businesses, not exactly terribly successful in those. So you need people with that experience. I'm not saying people from business should be politicians. That normally doesn't work very well. What they can do, though, is look at the reasons that people go into business and what are the things they're frightened of and can help them with. And it really comes down to giving them that confidence, but then help the consumer as well to realise that actually over time, actually the things are going to get better value. How do you do that? Well, again, by actually making sure that actually regional areas are getting more investment coming into them by way, again, more tax breaks coming through. And we see that happening with centres actually being redeveloped, as you see the high street changing into the next stage. It's a very painful process to go through, but it's occurring. Look at the positive side, rather than necessarily the endlessly negative side. We are still actually setting up businesses, which is quite remarkable when you look at the daily headlines, which would push most people off the edge of a cliff.
Well, I would agree, but I think you also have to remember that intrinsic to the DNA of Labour is to pay more money to unions. I'm just looking back here at Labour already, since they've been in power, handing out bumper pay rises of up to 22% over 2 years. And, of course, they thought they got the unions off their back. The unions say they're going to go back on strike again. Try telling someone who works in a private business what it's like when you don't earn any money. You don't get paid.
It's ridiculous, isn't it? We had this deal with some of the railway unions. So give them the money in return for the silence. Where was the improvement in terms of saying, well, we're going to have to adjust your incredibly old-fashioned rules with regard to overtime, whereby some of the structures, particularly in the northwest of England, actually railways depend upon overtime because it's in the contracts, and therefore if people got an overtime ban for doing apparently extra work, it's not extra work, it's their job. Now, this is where you need to try and change it to actually get those people to live in the real world and actually face up to it. Otherwise, you're going to have, and we've already seen noises from the railway unions again saying we're still way behind in terms of real terms. Well, so what? So's everybody else. learn to grow and become more productivity, and over a while that will improve.
So if there was one piece of advice you could give to Rachel Reeves, who's digging her heels in and just repeating the same line verbatim, same line, we inherited a very difficult balance sheet, this is what we're doing, we've paid the unions, da, da, da. What piece of advice? I mean, should she just stand back? Should she say, look, I got that wrong? What piece of advice would you give her?
Right. One key thing is look at those, focus on those areas that are growing. So smaller companies pay no corporation tax up to a level of whatever it is, 3-5 million, doesn't really matter. Get them going, get to the stage where it's good to be profitable. Get the engine moving, and that will actually then spread quite quickly because people will have more confidence. More companies are setting up. Just something like that.
But you'd also reinvest, wouldn't you?
Oh, absolutely. And of course, it actually costs the government not very much money because if you're not having companies which are paying tax because they didn't set up in the first place, well, it's a net zero. If you can actually reward them in due course by saying you don't pay tax to start with, you can pay tax later when you're stronger. Now add to that things like, and we've already got the enterprise investment scheme, but put an R in front of it. So it's a regional enterprise investment scheme so that people at Weir and Newcastle could invest in local businesses effectively. Funnily enough, actually, in 1946, I don't think I was around then, there were actually 45 stock exchanges, full of silly gits and red braces. You don't need them. But what it meant was there were regional areas you could fund yourself for local businesses. And I'm afraid that has all disappeared. We've got a London Stock Exchange now, which frankly isn't really fit for purpose. It's good for big businesses, but an awful lot of them seem to be going the other way. And we have the AIM market for smaller companies, and it's not attracting a lot of business. When we first started, actually in Glasgow, nearly 30 years ago, it was phenomenally successful because, again, it went to the key areas of where the growth was coming from. It enthused investors. It enthused people actually to set up businesses, and it gave people back to that one word again, confidence, that actually it's going to be all right. So I'm very sod Grinch. Actually give us some mechanism to be able to say it's going to be all right because we're quite good at a lot of things. Yeah, some things are wrong, of course they are. But actually make it positive, not through funny glasses, make it positive to show where the growth is. This is what we're going to specialise in. We're not going to copy Europe. We're not going to copy the States. We're going to focus on the areas we're good at and encourage investment domestically and internationally.
Well said, Justin. By the way, Louise has just messaged in saying we need Justin and Betty for Chancellor and take over the Treasury. Justin, really good.
Anyway.
Oh, she's out. Really good to talk to you. Have a very happy Christmas. If